The sea gave it back. 90 years after the SS Inverness sank beneath a midnight storm, its hull rose again, pristine, gleaming, and utterly silent. No SOS, no drift record, no crew. Only a glimmer of firelight behind its windows and the faint aroma of bread carried across the waves. What if the ocean had never let it go? What if the ship itself remembered every life it lost? And why, after all this time, were the meals on deck still warm? As the rescue vessel neared, something in the fog shifted. Like a breath held too long, finally released. The radio crackled once, then died. A shadow moved across the bridge. Then the ship's bell rang. Once, though no wind touched it. Clara's voice trembled as she recorded the log. Visual confirmation of SS Inverness. Condition impossible. The hull bore no rust, no sea growth, as if preserved in a glass bottle. They boarded under silence thick enough to hear their own heartbeats. Every corridor echoed back their footsteps, delayed, like sound trapped in water. There was no decay, no dust. Only the hum of unseen machinery and the faint scent of lemon oil on polished railings. Then they found the galley. Every pan warm, every cup filled. Dr. Merrick whispered that heat couldn't survive this long. Clara only stared at the table, at food that steamed like it had been waiting for them. Jonas descended into the engine room, following the faint vibration through the metal floor. The gauges read normal pressure, though no power source could be found. He reached for the control lever. It was warm, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. Somewhere above, footsteps echoed. Though all three were below deck, he called out, his voice bouncing back in a dozen layers of delay. Then the sound of a chair scraping, distant but near enough to make him freeze. The radio hissed with static, forming fragments of words in a voice none of them recognized. Captain Elias inspected the bridge. Instruments moved as though guided by invisible hands, compass spinning, wheel turning slowly, logbook pages fluttering despite no breeze. He reached out and steadied the wheel, and in that moment the ship seemed to breathe. Every light dimmed, then flared brighter. Through the window he thought he saw the reflection of another sea, calm, green, and sunlit. But when he blinked, it was gone, and a trail of wet footprints crossed the bridge floor, leading away from him. They re-grew on deck as fog thickened once more. The ship's clock now read 11:48. Only 1 minute had passed since boarding, though their dive logs said 2 hours. A low hum filled the air, not mechanical, but harmonic, like voices buried beneath the sea. Clara touched the railing and recoiled. It was ice cold. In that instant, the Inverness shifted. Not a wave, but a pulse. A slow heartbeat from its core. Elias whispered that they weren't alone. Below deck, something moved toward them. Slow, steady, deliberate. It began with the clocks. Everyone aboard the Inverness, from the wall chronometers to the pocket watch in Elias's hand, ticked perfectly in unison. Then they stopped. Clara noticed the air changing, thickening with a metallic taste. Dr. Merrick's flashlight flickered, revealing condensation forming on the inside of his goggles. Jonas swore he heard voices humming below deck, singing something that sounded like a lullaby through static. The air vibrated with memory. Elias called for them to regroup, but his voice came back to him seconds later, delayed, layered, repeating itself from behind. In that echo, another voice whispered, "You're late." In the captain's quarters, the air felt alive. Furniture stood exactly as it had the day the ship vanished. Clothes folded neatly, maps unfurled on the desk, a glass of water still trembling as if someone had just placed it down. Clara opened the logbook. The last entry read, "Dinner served. 11:47. She turned the page. Blank. Then, under the lamplight, ink bled upward from the paper, forming new words before her eyes. They weren't dated 1935. They were dated today. Elias read the new line aloud. I've come back for the meal. Jonas ventured below deck again to check the engine room. This time, it wasn't empty. Figures stood among the pipes, hazy, translucent, faces lost in shifting steam. Their clothes were soaked, dripping continuously, though the floor was dry. Each turned slowly toward him, mouths moving in silence. He lifted his light, and they vanished. When he looked back at the walls, the condensation had formed perfect handprints pressed outward from the metal. Jonas backed away, whispering they were trying to get out. The radio crackled faintly in reply. Still are. Dr. Merrick analyzed the ship's readings: barometric pressure, electromagnetic resonance temperature, and found every dial looping between identical values. We're inside a closed cycle, he muttered, like the ship is replaying itself. The others listened as the hum returned, deeper now, vibrating through their bones. Clara felt it pulse in her chest like a heartbeat, not her own. On the walls, droplets began to run upward. Elias reached for the door, and it wouldn't move. The ship had sealed itself. From somewhere deep within, a bell rang twice. They tried to send a distress signal. The transmitter responded with an old recording, the Inverness's final SOS from 1935. Elias listened as his own name echoed through the static, even though he'd never been aboard back then. Then the recording played a voice none of them recognized. A calm woman saying, "Dinner is getting cold." The ship shuddered. Lights surged, and outside, something massive moved beneath the waterline. A shape the size of the vessel passed beneath them, and for a heartbeat, the Inverness's reflection in the waves looked alive, breathing. The first to vanish was Jonas. One moment he stood beside the galley door, flashlight cutting through the mist, and the next, his voice just folded into the hum. His equipment clattered to the floor, light still glowing beam fixed on an empty space. The remaining three searched in silence, each footstep echoed by another set, not their own. In the dining hall, candles burned steady, untouched by time. Elias noticed plates had been added. 5 now, not 4. Clara's hand shook as she counted again. Dr. Merrick murmured, "The ship knows we're here." Somewhere down the hall, Jonas' laughter returned, muffled as if coming from underwater. Elias followed the sound of Jonas' voice into the lower quarters. The air was thick, humming like a living organ. When he opened a cabin door, he found Jonas seated at a table identical to the one above, spoon in hand, eating silently. His skin was pale, eyes unfocused. Elias called his name. Jonas lifted his gaze. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Then he froze mid-breath, spoon hovering, and melted into mist that drifted toward the ceiling. Only his chair remained, gently rocking. The lantern above dimmed, then flared white, erasing the shadows for a single heartbeat. Dr. Merrick tried to make sense of it, flipping through his notes, his hands trembling. "Every reading matches the night of the sinking," he whispered. "The ship isn't haunted, it's repeating." He traced the coordinates scrawled in his notebook, realizing they weren't positions. They were timestamps. As the minute hand struck 11:47 again, the temperature plunged. Clara watched frost form along the metal railing. Through the window, silhouettes appeared at the table below, dozens of them, transparent, dining in silence. The Inverness was hosting its final supper again. The dinner bell rang. Its tone vibrated through every surface, warping the air. Clara turned toward the sound and found the galley filled, not with food, but with water, suspended in midair like glass. Within it floated cutlery, plates, fragments of conversation, all frozen mid-motion. Then the bell rang again, and everything fell, crashing down as the water dissolved into mist. Elias pulled her away, shouting her name. The ship groaned, listing slightly, and beneath the boards came a sound, knuckles tapping, slow, deliberate. Someone was knocking from below. When they returned to the deck, Dr. Merrick was gone. His journal lay open, pages fluttering though no wind blew. The sea below pulsed with light, faint and rhythmic, like lanterns swaying in the deep. Elias clutched the rail, breath visible in the cold. "It's calling us," Clara said softly. "It wants the table full." The fog thickened again, swirling into human outlines that drifted toward the stairs. Then, one by one, the deck lamps flickered out, leaving only the lantern at the ship's wheel burning. A small, defiant flame in an ocean of night. The clock struck 11:47 again. The air thickened until breathing felt like drowning. Clara and Elias found themselves standing at the grand table, now set for 12. Every plate shimmered with a faint, inner glow. Across from them, the ghostly diners materialized, faces pale and glistening as though carved from salt. They didn't blink, didn't breathe. Yet every head turned toward the two intruders in unison. The candles flared. Chairs pulled themselves out, scraping against the deck with unbearable slowness. Clara whispered, "They want us to sit." Elias hesitated, until the door behind them sealed shut with the sound of splintering wood. One by one, the apparitions began to eat. Forks rose, spoons clinked, yet no food diminished. Each movement mirrored the others perfectly, like puppets bound by invisible strings. Elias reached for Clara's arm, but her eyes were fixed ahead, glassy. The steam from the dishes grew thicker, swirling upward, forming faint human shapes above each plate. Echoes of the same diners reflected twice. Elias slammed his fist on the table, shouting for them to stop. Every ghost froze. Then slowly, they turned toward him, mouths opening wider than any living thing should manage. Clara snapped from her trance as a voice, her own voice, echoed behind her. "Dinner is getting cold." She turned and saw herself reflected in the dining room's mirror, older, drenched, with eyes black as coal. The reflection smiled first. Then it reached through the glass. The surface rippled like water as the mirrored Clara extended a dripping hand. Elias shouted her name, pulling her back just as the mirror shattered outward, shards hanging in the air, suspended by unseen force. Every piece showed a different scene. The storm, the sinking, the faces of the drowned. "The wind, the old eye, the draw out." The ship began to move. Slowly. Silently, it turned toward the horizon, though no one was at the helm. Through the portholes, the fog split apart, revealing the exact storm that had sunk it in 1935. Lightning frozen in the sky like cracks in glass. Elias gripped the table as the hull groaned, and the lanterns swung wild. The ghostly diners began to fade, their forms dissolving into threads of smoke that coiled toward the ceiling beams. Only their eyes lingered last, glowing faintly before extinguishing like dying embers. Then came the silence. The hum stopped. The lights steadied. For a heartbeat, the Inverness seemed normal again. Clean decks, clear air, warm glow. Elias stood alone at the table. Clara was gone. Only her journal remained beside an untouched bowl of soup. He picked it up, flipping to the last page. Fresh ink spelled 7 words. "Dinner served. 11:47. Do not be late." Outside, the horizon cracked open with a new dawn, one that cast no shadow at all. The bell rang once, soft and final, echoing across an ocean that no longer seemed real. The storm returned without warning. Waves rose higher than the masts, curling over the ship like walls of glass. Elias clung to the railing, shouting Clara's name into the wind, but only the echo of his own voice came back. Lightning froze midair, hanging still as if time itself had hesitated. He stumbled toward the bow, watching the sea peel open beneath him. Below the surface, thousands of faint lights pulsed in rhythm, lanterns, watches, the heartbeat of something immense. And among them, faces drifted upward. His crew, his friends, all smiling as they reached for him from beneath the waves. Elias found the engine room submerged waist deep. The water wasn't cold. It vibrated softly, humming with memory. The machinery moved on its own, pistons pumping without power. In the reflection of the water's surface, he saw the ship not as it was, but as it had been. Bright, new, alive. Crewmen laughed. Music played. The clock struck 11:47. When he reached to touch the reflection, the laughter stopped, and all the figures turned to look directly at him. The hum became a chorus of whispers, repeating one phrase over and over. "You stayed too long." He climbed toward the bridge, guided by the faint chime of the bell. The air shimmered, and with each step, the ship aged backward, rust receding, paint brightening, lanterns returning to flame. By the time he reached the wheel, the Inverness looked brand new. He looked out over a sunlit sea untouched by storm. Crewmen bustled across the deck, unaware of him. Then a younger version of himself stood at the helm, smiling, alive. Elias reached out to touch him, and time fractured. Every bell, every clock, every heartbeat struck 11:47 in perfect synchrony. The ship groaned as worlds collided. The 1935 crew and the modern explorers flickered between existence, past and present, overlapping like film reels out of sync. Clara appeared beside him again, but her eyes reflected stars, not flame. "We're not meant to leave," she whispered. "We're meant to remember." Then the deck split open, revealing the sea beneath. A mirror, endless and black. In it, the Inverness floated upside down, a perfect reflection repeating their every move a second too late. Elias understood then. The ship never sank. It just fell into its own reflection. Rain ceased. The water stilled. Elias stood alone at the helm, surrounded by calm so deep it pressed on his eardrums. The clock beside him ticked once, then stopped forever at 11:47. He raised his eyes to the horizon and saw two suns, one rising, one setting. Between them hung the reflection of the Inverness, now weightless, dissolving into light. He whispered a final log entry. "To those who find this ship, leave it. Time is not ours to rescue." As he spoke, the sea folded inward, swallowing the vessel without sound. Only the echo of the bell remained. One note suspended in eternity. 60 years passed before anyone dared return to the coordinates. The ocean had grown quieter there, as if holding its breath. A modern salvage team aboard the Asterion sent down submersible drones, cameras panning through miles of unbroken darkness. Nothing. Until one of the drone's spotlights caught metal. A bell, perfectly preserved, engraved with the name Inverness. As it was lifted toward the surface, a pulse rippled through the water. Instruments went dead. The sonar screamed once, recording an impossible depth reading, infinity. Then through the static came a voice, aged, steady, calm. "To those who find this ship, leave it." On board the Asterion, technicians replayed the transmission again and again. The voice was clear, recorded on analog equipment, though none existed aboard their vessel. When amplified, background sounds emerged. The creak of wood, the crackle of fire, the slow rhythm of a ticking clock. A second voice whispered faintly beneath it, almost pleading. "Dinner served." 11:47. The team froze. No one spoke. In the next instant, every monitor flashed white, then black. When they returned, the bell camera feed showed something new. The faint outline of a hand pressed against the inside of the metal. Lead diver Ren Torres descended to retrieve the logbook detected near the wreck. The current was still, unnaturally so. He found it wedged inside a corroded lantern cage, pages pristine, ink unfaded. When he opened it, bubbles escaped as though the paper had been breathing. The words shifted on the page before settling into legible lines. Act 6. Scene 3. He froze, staring through his visor. The next line formed slowly beneath it, his own name. Ren Torres, 37, male, descending. His breathing accelerated. The logbook flipped its own page. When Ren surfaced, he said nothing. The logbook was dry, though it had been submerged for nearly a century. He placed it on the captain's desk, and when they opened it again, the handwriting had changed. Modern ink, written by an unseen hand. Each new page chronicled their own actions in real time. The words, "They're reading this now," appeared before their eyes. Then the power failed. Emergency lights flickered on, casting the room in deep red. Somewhere outside, the ship's bell began to ring. Once, twice, then stopped. The clock on the wall read 11:47. They never reached port. 3 days later, a passing freighter reported an unmanned vessel drifting quietly across calm seas. Its nameplate read Asterian, but on the bow, etched beneath the fresh paint, another name bled through. Inverness. Inside, the galley table was set for 12. Steam rose from untouched plates, and a journal lay open at the center. The final entry, dinner served. 11:47. Again. The sea outside was flat, perfectly still, mirroring every detail above it, but half a second late. By dawn, the horizon had vanished. There was no difference between sea and sky. Just an endless sheet of gray light. The Asturian's hull shimmered, its name dissolving letter by letter, until Inverness remained. Ren stood on deck, staring at the water's surface, which mirrored his every breath a moment too late. The reflection blinked before he did. He whispered to the others that the ship beneath them wasn't their own. It was waiting for them to realize what they'd become. Somewhere below, bells began to toll. 1, 2, 3. Each louder, closer, more human. Inside the galley, the candles burned without flame. Shadows moved on their own, eating through light. Each crew member saw themselves seated at the table, but the reflections didn't move with them. Instead, they smiled faintly, raising spoons, eating air. The journal on the table began to write once more, though no pen touched it. The words bled slowly. Act 7, Scene 2. Then it wrote a new name, each of theirs, followed by a short dash and the word reflected. Ren reached for the page, but his mirrored hand reached first. The storm returned, not as thunder, but as memory. Wind roared in reverse, waves rose downward, and time itself began to loop. The Inverness's bell rang backward, pulling its sound back into silence. Ren shouted, but his voice came out delayed, repeating from behind him a full sentence late. "We're trapped between echoes," he said, as the reflection sea opened like a wound. Below, another ship, an exact twin, rose slowly from the depths, moving in perfect synchronization, its crew inverted, eyes black and shining like obsidian mirrors. Ren descended into the reflection. One step, and gravity reversed. He fell upward, landing on the underside of the ship. Only it wasn't metal now, but glass, revealing thousands of faces trapped beneath the surface, each staring up through him. They mouthed silent prayers in rhythm, hands pressed against invisible barriers. He reached for one face, Clarice, and she whispered without sound, "Let it sink." The hull began to crack, light pouring out instead of water. Above, the real ship, or what remained of it, started to crumble into dust that drifted skyward. The light grew until nothing else existed. Sea, sky, ship, all dissolved into one endless reflection. Time stilled. Only the faint ringing of the bell persisted, each note softer than the last. Then, silence. The Inverness was gone. No wreck, no debris, no trace. Just calm water stretching forever. Yet sometimes, sailors say, at precisely 11:47 on windless nights, a glow forms on the horizon. A vessel of glass sailing both above and below the sea, its crew seated forever at a table that never cooled. And if you listen close enough, The ocean whispers your name. Right before the reflection answers.